You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Who day and night must scramble for a living, feed a wife and children, send his daily prayers.
Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson with NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking Torah, learning stuff, and having fun while we learn. You can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com, and I will answer as many as I can. Or you can check our webpage at letstalktorah.net, and everything is there. The old shows, the new shows, places for comments, questions. If you want to join the show, it's all amazing. And there's the all-important donate button. Please, we ask you, and people help us, hit that donate button. You allow us to continue producing our shows in these wonderful studios in NRM Streamcast. And Alan, there's an echo, but okay, we'll figure it out. And we are still in the top 10 in Feed Spot's 10 best Jewish book podcasts, and we are at number 5. You know, the weather is getting cold. Oh, here we are. That's much better. The weather is getting cold. Some of you have snow. There is no snow here. I don't know. Dusting. I need real snow. Couple weeks, we're going to head up north, and hopefully there will be real snow. I know a lot of the country got snow, but not up here. This was a funny thing I saw this morning. I was looking at my weather. And you always look at the weather, okay, it's 20 degrees outside, feels like 10. It's 15 degrees outside, feels like 5. Today was a new one. Today, the real temperature was 17, and it feels like 75. I'm sorry, 75. I wish 75. And it feels like 25. I don't even know how that's possible. I understand there's a wind, it can make it colder, but what was making it feel warmer? I don't know. But I thought it was pretty funny to see. In any case, we are in the last Torah portion in the book of Genesis. In the Sefer Bereshis, the last parasha, it is Vayechi. Vayechi means life, which is interesting because we're about to talk about the death of Jacob. And at the end of the Torah portion, we're going to talk about the death of Joseph. But still, the Torah portion calls it life. This is the life of Jacob. Again, even though it's the end of his life, but perhaps living is, did you live? I heard somebody say beautiful last week. I was in Lakewood. I had a grandchild, and the rabbi in his speech says that when Joseph asks his brothers, is my father still alive? He meant to say, is he able to study Torah? I'm not there. Is he living? Is he able to study? What's he doing? He wanted to know what his life was like. And now Jacob is at the end of his life. This last 17 years, he studies with Joseph's son, so he's studying with his grandson every day, with Ephraim. It's life. And now that Joseph is with his father Jacob, we are ready to see the beginning of the Jewish nation, full of blessings. And the whole Torah portion is full of blessings. We're going to bless Joseph and his 2 sons. The 12 tribes will be blessed. I think I even used good words. The book of Genesis is the creation of the world. It is. And you have Adam and Chava, and you have Noah. And then we get to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, but we haven't begun the Jewish nation. In this Torah portion, really last week, Jacob and his children come down to Egypt, and they settle in. How many are there already? Officially, they come down with 70 souls. There's really a few more. But the nation will begin in the book of Exodus. The creation of the nation of Israel. Yes, we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but the nation, that's really in the next book. So here we are, ready to tie a bow on the book of Genesis. The world is now functioning because you've had an Abraham, an Isaac, and a Jacob. The world is functioning. But the nation of Israel, that's going to be in the next book. So the first thing that's happening in this Torah portion, Jacob says to Joseph, he calls Joseph, and he says, I want to be buried in Israel. I don't want to be buried here. How did Jacob even know he had a right to ask for this? Because on his way down in last week's Torah portion, God says to Jacob, like a double language, I'm going to bring you up, I'm going to bring you up. So one bringing up is referring to the nation of Israel, but one bringing up is that you, Jacob, have the right. You can ask to be buried in Israel, and unlike everybody else, they're going to be buried in Egypt, and the tribes will bring up their the leaders of their tribe. But Jacob doesn't have to be buried in Egypt at all. So Rashi says he has three reasons, and it's very possible that these three reasons are intertwined why he doesn't want to be buried in Egypt. First of all, he was worried that he would turn into an idol. Remember, he comes down to Egypt, he goes to the Nile, the river overflows, and that's how they got water in Egypt. That was their whole, and they didn't have rain. So the way you watered your crops was the overflow of the river. I always think about this. I mean, that's really historical. The good farmland was always near the river, where the river would overflow the banks and your fields would get flooded, you could plant. What do we do in America, probably other countries? We build our cities by the river because it's easy to transport goods. I understand. But rivers are meant to overflow. So you're building your houses right in a flood zone, which is why insurance companies don't like insuring flood zones. They're only asking for loss, which is why I just read this. Unbelievable. If you've noticed in the news, so California, LA is having these tremendous fires, and it's consuming houses all over the place. I read a number like losses of up to $50 billion, and it seems very expensive areas are getting burnt. And I just read many insurance companies within the last 4 months have told everybody, we're not insuring you anymore. Whatever it is, California's laws, they can't charge enough, it's too much risk. But all of a sudden, all these people, everything getting burnt, and who knows what kind of insurance plans are even available to these people, whether it's California's fault, whether it's the insurance company's fault. That's really not for, we're not really so concerned whose fault it is. But it's who loses in the end? The people on the houses lose. Anyway, so Jacob comes down. He's caused the river to overflow. He is the one that's brought life back to Egypt. The hunger, the famine is now over. So in a place like Egypt, you caused the river to overflow. You are the new idol. So Jacob is concerned. I do not want to be buried in Egypt. First of all, they're going to turn me into an idol. Second of all, the third plague by the 10 plagues is the bugs. And Jacob says these bugs are going to crawl all over me. And it's not nice. We have a concept of honoring a dead body. And by the way, part of the reason there's many reasons. First of all, the body was the house for the soul. So the soul sees how its body is being treated. Very embarrassing if it's not treated nicely. That's why we've talked in the past. When there's a eulogy and you say silly things or embarrassing things, the soul is there listening. And that's embarrassing. We honor the person who died. We try to bury a person as quickly as possible. I explained to my class, like right now, the former president, President Carter, is lying in state, right? People are coming by, and officially that's a very, very big honor. At the same time, but the body's just lying there. So as a Jewish thought, a body lying around is not an honor. But however it is, this is considered honor for the president. They were going to do the same thing to Jacob, right? His body's going to be here, and everyone's going to come and say their goodbyes to this great person. So Jacob does not want to be buried in Egypt because, again, these bugs are going to come and crawl over his body. Now, that's really an interesting thought because usually the body rots. The body decomposes. So there is no body to worry that the bugs are crawling all over it by that third plague of bugs, of Keenim. Except, I told my class today a very, very famous story. I mean, it's famous because people know the story, and we've said it probably a couple times already. But since I said it today, so I'm reminded of the story. Back in Europe, when poor people would travel from town to town to raise funds, so you didn't go knocking door to door. No one knew who you were. You had to present yourself to a person in town, and his job was to go collect from the town for the poor person. He was called the Rabbi Tzvi. He was the person in charge of charity. You have to figure when a poor person came through town, however often they came through, you get one a day, a couple a week. That's it. Anyways, in this certain town, poor person comes, goes to the Rabbi Tzvi, and he goes around, he collects, he sends him on his way, and then another person comes. He says, Aish, I would love to take care of you. I already collected today. It's very hard to go through town 2 times in one day. Please, please, he begged him, please, I need the help, and I can't stay. I have to get to the next town. Fine. So he goes through, and people are giving him looks, and people are grumbly because they understand what his job is, but come on, twice in one day, we don't do that. He collects the money, sends the man on his way, and then, unheard of, a third person comes. And he says, I can't help you. What do you want me to do? I've gone through twice today. I never go through twice. 3 times, they'll have my head. I need you to wait till tomorrow at least. And the poor person is begging him, no, please, I'm so desperate in my family and whatever. And he begs him, please. So the guy says, okay, let me see what I can do. So he thinks to himself, he says, there is a wealthy fellow, young guy, doesn't really work, has a lot of money, hangs out by the bar, or whatever it was in those days. Maybe he'll be nice to me. Maybe he'll do me a favor. I'll try my luck. What can I lose? So he goes to where this young fellow hangs out. And the young fellow says, you're here again 3 times in one day? He says, I'm so sorry. But, you know, what should I do? You're a generous person. Crazy day. 3 people came in. Never happens. Like, what am I supposed to do? So the young fellow, bored fellow, says, tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to make a proposition. If you accept, I'll give you all the money you need. If you don't accept, I'm not giving you. Okay, what do you need? I have a pair of priest's clothing at home. Now, rabbis do not walk around in priestly garbs, right? Is what rabbis wear, it's what the priests wear. Certainly in those days, it wasn't considered a very kosher costume. He says, you're going to wear this priestly garbs, vestments, whatever they're called, and we're going to parade behind you. We're going to wake up this sleepy town. And if you do this for about 20 minutes, then I'll give you the money you're waiting for. The guy doesn't know what she do. He has no way of collecting the money. There's a way to collect the money. Will it really be so bad? He says, fine, I'll do it. He puts on the clothes, starts walking down the street, and these guys are singing and dancing and trumpeting and who knows what. And people going out the windows, coming in the street, and hear this important person. If his job is to collect charities, obviously a trusted, honorable citizen, and people are fuming, and they're yelling at him, and they're throwing tomatoes at him, and the guy's face is beet red. After 20 minutes, they make their way back to the bar. He says, Mr. Rabbi Tzvi, you are such a good sport. I'm gonna let you keep the clothes. So he gives him the money. He takes off the clothes, puts it in a bag, takes it home, meets the poor person who does not know the incredible embarrassment that this person went through, and he takes the clothes and he throws it in his closet, and it makes him sick. Yeah, he's distraught over what he had to do. A few weeks later, there's a big rabbi coming through town, and I tell the story to my class, and I forgot his name this morning, and I still do not remember his name. But someone will remember the name and send me a message. Big rabbi coming through town, and he says to his attendant, I smell a beautiful smell. It's a beautiful, like the Garden of Eden smell. We must discover where it's coming from. And they're walking down the streets. He says, coming from this house. He points to the Rabbi Tzvi's house. Knock on the door, and the Rabbi Tzvi answers, oh, yes, what can I do for you? Now, there's a smell in this house, and I must discover what it is. Do you mind if I come in? He comes in. It's coming from the closet. Do you mind if we open the closet? Okay, he opens the closet, and there he pulls out the bag, and he pulls out the priest's clothing. And the Rabbi Tzvi is just embarrassed all over again. And this rabbi says, you must tell me the story. What happened? And he repeats the story. He says, listen to me. When you get buried, you tell the Chevra Kadisha, the burial society, that they are to bury you in these clothes. And then the angels, the destructive angels that sometimes greet a person when he dies, won't be able to touch you. Okay? Fast forward, I believe 50 years. It might have been longer. Fast forward 50 years, and like many cemeteries in Europe, as the countries were modernizing and they were building roads, it was usually convenient to build a road right through a cemetery. Very, very common. And they would basically tell the town, we're building a road through the cemetery. If you want, you can dig up all the people buried here and you can rebury them elsewhere, but we're making a road. So when they went to dig in this part of the cemetery, they found the Rabbi Tzvi's body fresh, as if he'd been buried 10 minutes ago. And they said, something's wrong. Like, body's decomposed. These graves here are 50 plus years old. Doesn't make sense. And they researched and they discovered this was a story. It's not normal. It's not normal. It's whoever heard of a body not decomposing. So it happens to be, it's brought down in multiple places that great people, great religious people, their bodies do not decompose. And if great people's bodies don't decompose, you can imagine that Jacob's body is not decomposing. Which leads to another fascinating thought in this week's Torah portion. And that is, Joseph has his father embalmed. Why? We were talking before, we were so careful to honor a body. How could he spend the 40 days delaying his father's burial just to embalm his father? And the answer is, I was just telling you about President Carter, because in a country like Egypt, someone like Jacob is not getting buried right away. There's going to be a 30-day national mourning period. People are going to be able to come by, and they're going to realize his body's not decomposing. And we're talking about Egypt, right? 110 degrees in the shade. It gets hot. It's impossible. That's why they made the mummies, by the way. All the mummification was to preserve the body. Joseph knows if he doesn't go through the pretend process of embalming his father's body, the Egyptians will discover that Jacob, his body's not decomposing. They'll never let Jacob take his father out of the country, and they'll turn him into an idol, which was the whole thing that Jacob says, don't bury me in Egypt. I'm afraid they're going to turn me into an idol. And if they find out that his body doesn't decompose, for sure they won't let his body out. So Joseph has to go through a whole process, which is totally not necessary, except that he has to fool the Egyptians so they can get his father out. a few other reasons before we get back into the burial over here, but a few other reasons brought down why Jacob did not want to be buried in Egypt. First of all, Rav Shmuel Hirsch says it was to teach his children Egypt is not our home. Israel's our home. Many people, by the way, like to be buried in Israel. There's a lot of reasons for it. But Rav Shmuel Hirsch says Jacob had to show his children Egypt is not home. Rashi, by the way, says the third reason that when there'll be the resurrection, when bodies will be brought back to life, sometime after the Messiah comes, it all is going to take place in Israel. So if your body is not buried in Israel, your body's going to have to roll to get to the land of Israel. It seems that's painful, and Jacob did not want to go through that. Just one other interesting thought before we move on, and that is the Abarbanel says there's another lesson over here. As the Torah portion starts out, that Jacob is telling Joseph where he wants to be buried. He says, we need to learn from here. You can't wait to tell your family what you want when a person dies. If you do not tell your family where you want to be buried, how you want to be buried, what kind of cemetery, where cemetery, what cemetery, if you don't tell your family, sometimes it's too late. And now the family is going to fight over what the person wanted. We've talked in the past about cremation. Right? Cremation, again, is not a Jewish thing. The body suffers tremendously. It's dishonorable to the body. It's painful to the body, and it's a terrible idea for many reasons. But if you don't tell your family that you don't want to be cremated, how are they going to know? And sometimes, certainly in the families that are less religious, they could think cremation is cheaper, and maybe it's better for the environment, they think. But if you've never told them, now they're going to fight. Tell your family, I do not want to be cremated. And then you'll get buried. You don't tell the family, now we got problems. Okay, so let's, in our last couple of minutes, at least for this show, there's a few whys that I wanted to know. Why does Jacob call in Joseph to bury him in Israel? What about the other brothers? Jacob makes Joseph promise. I need you to promise me that you will not bury me in Egypt. We need a promise for it. You don't trust Joseph? His word is not good enough? We need a promise for it. And thirdly, there seems to be something out of order. In this part of the Torah portion, Jacob doesn't mention anything about Rachel. When we get to the blessing for Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's two sons, all of a sudden Jacob starts to talk about why he buried Rachel on the side of the road, and he didn't bring her body, that wasn't far, by the way, to the Maris Machpelah, where Jacob's going to be buried, where Isaac and Rebekah are buried, where Abraham and Sarah are buried. If I'm Joseph, right, I want to know, you buried my mother on the side of the road, and you want me to overextend myself to bury you in Israel? Why should I do that? So Jacob, I don't think he forgets, right? Why doesn't he inform Joseph of what, if there is a good reason, which we're going to talk about, if there is a good reason why Rachel is buried on the side of the road, why not mention this fact to Joseph? So the answer to these questions are as follows. Jacob knows, as we said before, he doesn't want to be turned into an idol. He wants to get out of Egypt. Who will have the power? The brothers? The brothers have nothing to do with Pharaoh. The brothers are not going to get permission. And clearly, they're not in a position to leave. It must be that they can't, however this was taken care of, the brothers cannot get out of Egypt. There's just no way to get out. So Joseph is the only one that has the power to do it. Therefore, Jacob calls Joseph. Why doesn't he inform him about his mother? It's a very interesting thought, very, very important to think about. And that is that Jacob wants Joseph to do the mitzvah. He's giving him a mitzvah to do. If I have questions why I should do the command, and I don't want to do your command because of my questions, so now already, right? So I'm losing out on my opportunity to do the mitzvah. If you explain to me that they have no reason not to do it, well, then it's easy as apple pie. And the value of the mitzvah has been lessened. But if